All right, let's get right into it. John Adams, our second president after Washington stops choosing to be president, doesn't run for re-election. He has a number of problems. First one we'll look at is his problems with his vice president. His vice president is Thomas Jefferson, who had used to, at one point, of course, they worked together on like the Declaration of Independence and generally making the revolution happen. But they're really on opposite sides of things. So one reason is the Constitution, when it was originally written, it made the first place winner of the election would be president, and whoever was in second place got to be vice president. So the person that Adams was kind of running against to become president ends up being his vice president. So of course they're going to clash with each other. Jefferson had really opposite views about things, about government, especially about the power of the national government. Adams is one of those Federalists. Jefferson was from that sort of anti-Federalist group when we were looking at the ratification of the Constitution. So these clashes just over and over and over, they're arguing about things. They're not working together well as a team. So that leads to, for one thing, a new amendment to the Constitution. The 11th Amendment, and you don't really need to worry about, but the 12th Amendment gives us the system that we know today where you have to run separately. There's a separate election really for president and vice president. They happen at the same time, but you're voting for two different people, so that fixes that problem. And really what this does also is this really makes those political parties even more different than they were before. Tensions get even worse between those groups, the Federalists and what end up becoming called different kinds of names. We can call them Jeffersonians or Jeffersonian Republicans. The names kept changing, but definitely the tensions get much worse. Jefferson and Adams don't even talk to each other, even though they're president and vice president. Okay, so along this time also, and one of the things they're arguing about, Federalists get really worried about invasion and anarchy and think that America is going to come to an end and that they need to do something about it. So one reason is Jefferson's friends make a lot of attacks in newspapers and in public, and they're even making threats against Federalists like John Adams. Some pretty nasty stuff gets put out there. Not from Jefferson personally. He has his people who sort of work for him or work with him do that. And if you remember from before, when the U.S. did not join the war to help France, France's supporters, French supporters get really angry about that. These are Americans, but they're people like Thomas Jefferson who really wanted France to get some help and for a French Revolution like the American Revolution. So these things lead Federalists to be really worried about maybe invasion from France that might be helped by some of those French supporters might help with some kind of an invasion. So here's the main thing they do about it. President Adams and the Federalists in Congress pass a couple of laws called the Alien and Sedition Acts. These are two separate laws. And alien meaning immigrants, people coming into this country. It really limited what immigrants could do, limited where people could come from. The Sedition Acts here really limited free speech, limited the ability of some of those attackers and friends of Jefferson to make those kinds of complaints. So I've got this arrow here because this solution really leads to another result, which is that a lot of people in America don't like these laws that go against free speech and what America was about. So Federalists lose a lot of elections in the next years here. The third thing we'll look at for for Adams, and I've got this sort of in-between color, because really it's not quite the blue, it's not quite the green. It's not just about, this is about economics, but really this is also about defending ourselves. What happens is these Americans are losing money and property because of attacks by French Navy ships. And again, this all goes back to the fact that U.S. government would not help the French against England. So French Navy they're still at war with England, but they're also attacking U.S. ships in the Atlantic. And we don't have a navy. The U.S. does not have a navy to protect those trading ships. Again, still a new nation, still trying to dig its way out of debt. So you have these Americans, hundreds and hundreds of ships getting their things taken. So one thing this leads to is a lot of Federalists of Adams's party, including Alexander Hamilton, urge him to declare war on France. And Adams really thinks about it, but finally by 1800 decides not to do it. But he's really being encouraged to do this as a way to get that money and property back, or to at least stop it getting taken. All right, and that leads us to Jefferson. Because Adams didn't declare war, because of that Alien Sedition Act, Adams only gets one term as president. And then look at that. His former vice president gets to be in charge. And the first thing they want to do is cancel a lot of the actions of those Federalists. Again, Jefferson wanted a weaker U.S. government. He wanted more freedom for people in America. And that's really all what he's about. Federalists had appointed a lot of judges. They passed some laws, not just those Alien Sedition Acts, but a lot of other ones. And so the problem is Jefferson and his party want to cancel some of those actions. So what happens as a result of that? Well, really, sorry, undoing this here. Really what ends up happening is this. Some of those taxes and things do end up getting canceled. There you go. Some of those taxes do end up getting canceled. And the other thing that happens, we'll maybe get into this a bit more in class, some of the people who got their things canceled, some of these judges and folks who were trying to get the Jefferson's party's trying to kick them out. So you can cancel a law, but how do you cancel a person? Well, a case comes up against the Supreme Court, and without getting into too much detail, Supreme Court said that it can decide. It gets to decide, not the president, not the Congress. It gets to decide when something is unconstitutional, when the president or Congress does something that goes against the Constitution. Technically, that's not actually in the Constitution, but it's another form of that checks and balances, and we've been following this for about 200 years, so seems to be working out all right. All right, moving on here. Now, remember, Jefferson and his supporters were helping France. So once Jefferson gets to be in control, France is fine with America and American government, and they've stopped attacking our ships. So now there's still a chance of war, but now it's England that's involved in this one. I know, it just keeps seeming like it keeps going back and forth here. Now you have British Navy ships that are doing what the French ships had been doing before. They're capturing U.S. traders in the Atlantic while Jefferson's president. And, even worse, the British are also encouraging Indians, natives, to attack in the West. When we're talking about the West, we mean west of the Appalachian Mountains, around like Ohio and Michigan, Indiana, that kind of area. So you got two things that the British are trying to do to really sort of push their way around. So there's a chance of maybe another war against England. Well, Jefferson does a bunch of things about this. He does not declare war, but he really just messes up the situation. Without getting, again, try not to get too specific here, but the things that he tries to do really just mess up the situation. And especially what they do is affect the Northeast, areas of, like around New England. They really don't help us. They really mostly just help the South. Remember, he's from Virginia, and he's helping more folks from his area. Even folks in the West are upset. Folks west of the Appalachians are upset because Jefferson does nothing really about stopping those Indians from attacking. So that's something to keep in mind. You've got regions kind of uniting together. And this is kind of how things are going to go in the Civil War, but of course we're way before the Civil War right now. Okay, moving along to the economic issue. Jefferson really had this fear about northern banks, business, industry. It's going to destroy America. Remember, these folks really trust the common man, a regular kind of guy, rather than trusting companies. He's afraid these kinds of companies are going to destroy America. And so what he really, and one thing that about that, another way he sort of messes things up, the things he does against England really hurt Northeast traders. Again, this kind of connects with what we saw before. He's afraid that northern banks are going to destroy America, and the things he does really aren't going to help those kinds of traders. He's looking for ways to help Western expansion, and we'll see an example of that soon. He wants more kind of farmers. He thinks that's the kind of person who is going to make America grow. You know, the kind of person who was here in colonial times, and that's really the sort of result of this fear. This is what he does as president. So finally, our very last item here. One thing he does about that is a purchase of the land of Louisiana. Napoleon, the new leader of France, offers to sell a whole bunch of land in North America that's west of the Mississippi River. So it's not just the area around New Orleans that we know as Louisiana today. It's this much, much larger area that he's offering to sell. President's power is kind of limited, really limited by the Constitution. There's nothing in the Constitution about being able to purchase land, and especially for the president to do it on his own. But there's real uncertainty about, is this going to happen? How could this happen? And the solution is something we're going to explore in class, because this video has been going too long anyway. So for this one, you only need to know the causes for that problem, and we'll get to the reasons for it during class time. So thanks for watching. As always, go back to a part that you might have missed to try to get some things have one or two causes, some things have one or two effects. So rewatch as many times as you need, and we'll dig into a lot this more during social studies class.